Let me tell you about my experience with Sea of Stars. I initially discovered this game 2-ish years ago on Reddit where the developers posted a screen recording of the travel method the game would be utilizing. I thought that the game looked amazing and that it probably had some potential. Now, I never kept up with the game, but when I saw the trailer for it earlier this year, I recognized it almost instantly. I set a reminder to play the game when it came out, and here we are months later with me having completed the game. And before I get into spoilers, I will say it was an experience. I'm going to be putting a spoiler warning here. I will be discussing the true ending of the game, everything from lore, story, bosses, characters, encounters, etc. If you do not want to be spoiled on anything on the game, I insist.
Insist?
Yes, I insist you put the video in your watch later and come back after you've completed the game. I don't want to ruin the experience for you. Having said that, let's talk about the game. The most obvious thing I can get out of the way is that the game is beautiful. It goes for that HD 2D look that games like Octopath Traveler have adapted that appeal to your nostalgia, but it still looks breathtaking. A 2D world with 3D elements in this game still has a way of expressing itself in a unique way. The design and characters are intricate, and you really have to look at a character more than once to truly appreciate their details. It goes beyond just character designs as well. The world is beautiful, the levels are well crafted and well thought out. The shading during both the day and night is aggressive, and the colors pop. I could ramble on about the pixel art, but I want to move on to the gameplay. Now, this game takes inspiration from other games like Super Mario RPG and Chrono Trigger, and that appears in combat. Fights are solely turn-based, as there is sometimes actions you can take to reduce damage, increase damage, or prolong attacks. This extra dimension of combat isn't unique by any means, but it goes a long way in stopping the game from being stale. Each boss feels like a carefully crafted puzzle I need to time my attacks, combos, and actions around instead of spamming A. While the combat is a huge plus, the only issue I have is the lack of diversity in the combos. Most of the combos have a barrier to usage, which by the time you meet the conditions, the battle's probably over. Additionally, most of the combos involve Zales, so the amount of unique combos available is limited. Additionally, most of the overworld encounters being difficult to avoid does make the game drag on a bit, especially since you can't run from the battles. Moving on from combat, let's talk about traversal and the puzzles in this game. The puzzles in this game made me feel something a game hasn't made me feel in a long time. Smart. I felt smart playing this game, ladies and gentlemen. Growing up, I only had games on my DSi and Game Boy, and I would be forced to solve puzzles by myself as I didn't have internet access to look up tutorials, and my sister didn't like playing video games. So whenever I tackled a puzzle like the Seafoam Cave Strength puzzle in Pokemon Emerald and completed it myself, I would feel proud. This game brought back that feeling for me. Despite puzzles being difficult at times, I never looked up the tutorial. I would do trial and error, piecing together the hints, and going with the flow until I completed them. Those underwater puzzles being my favorite, as despite the fact it took a long time, I knew it was plausible, and once I succeeded, the euphoria would just flow in. The level design and puzzles were never overly complex, just required a careful eye with usage of information that the game gave you beforehand, straight S tier, and traversing through the overworld was great. The sites and areas never felt repetitive, and each area held its own niche. The addition of the grapple, the time-changing system, and the wind-moving powers made for some nice gameplay as well. There's not much for me to say about the sounds and music in this game. The music fits, and the sounds never felt really out of place. The game knows when to make use of silence and when to cut off the music and let the sounds take over. Some shoutouts that I'd like to give are the Storm calls for you during the Stormcaller fights. The song combined with the pirate doing the gritty off of the Hydralion was goated. Also, the slight, more techno-sounding themes they used in T-Rise World was a great indicator to the player they're traveling a new world. Now, while the characters did feel fairly generic and one-note, the story was strong, having great story beats. The two heroes, Valerie and Zal, soulless warriors that represent the sun and the moon directly, are tasked with taking down the dwellers in their world, lest they become world eaters. It's your typical RPG heroes must eradicate a source of evil in their world while implementing other common tropes such as their tutors betraying them and there being a looming evil in the background pulling the strings. This isn't a game to play if you were hoping it would break the mold regarding story. Valerie and Zale being fairly one-dimensional characters with little development doesn't help. However, I do think certain story elements of the story were handled well. For example, when Garl is fatally wounded, I like how the game tries to respect his death. They don't bail him out at the last second, but give him one last victory lap before he permanently leaves the party during the last act. Portraying Garl as a loyal friend to Valerie and Zale growing up, losing an eye protecting them from monsters, trespassing on sacred ground to give them a homemade snack, and sacrificing his life to save his friends all make his death impactful, especially since he went out with a smile, knowing that he gave his world a fighting chance. This game holding a funeral with multiple returning characters he left an impact on, allowing our characters to grieve his loss, and reminiscing on his life was mature and realistic, easily the strongest and most memorable moment in the game. Although the game replacing Garl with a character who's essentially a more useful version of him, with access to elemental magic, did feel disingenuous. It also adds insult to injury when Beast is added near the end of the game as a Deus Ex Machina to revive Garl later on. I'll admit that reviving him was the best reward a true ending could offer, but considering how well they handled his death, I felt like it should have stuck. Next up, Serai. The trope of her constantly needing to tell the cast something but never getting the chance to was annoying, but once it was revealed that she was a cyborg from another world where the Solace Warriors were taken out, and the dwellers roam freely, it hits like a truck once you connect all the dots. Her being the last person in her homeworld with hope for the future makes you realize how ambitious she is, giving her a huge plus in my books. I touched on it earlier, but the more techno-themed world was a great contrast to the game up until that point. Once you realize Afriel converted all the denizens into robots so the dwellers could feed off their negative emotions for eternity, that was dark, and a direction I didn't think the story would take. It also leads to a bittersweet ending as, yeah, you saved the world, but these people are still immortal robots, unable to die, nor reproduce. It's a good way of making Afriel irredeemable without involving him in the plot. Lastly, the story about Roshan, an alchemist who achieved immortality, finally stepping up to put an end to Afriel's tyranny was great. The game portrays Roshan as a neutral character that sticks to not interfering so Afriel doesn't meddle with the world anymore was a great plotline. I'm not the biggest fan of the all-knowing, all-powerful character archetype, as typically in stories they could handle the problems arising themselves but choose to delegate it to the player. However, I think what they did here with Roshan only interfering when necessary, trying to aid in growth of the player to make their friends see reason, was alright. I love how Roshan comes face to face with the truth that Afriel fell from grace sooner than he thought, basically decimating an entire race of people to give Roshan the gift of flight. That was handled exceptionally. It puts Roshan into a position where they really have to re-examine their whole relationship with the Fleshmancer, realizing their friend was gone far sooner than they expected. Although I dislike the fact that he left the party immediately after this, and doesn't return until the end. It seems like they threw away any potential character development they had for him. Lastly, the endings of the games. I like how they made Afriel the true final boss. The most powerful and villainous character actually being the true final boss that the player has to work towards is something I appreciate. No secret boss, no hidden monster that's stronger than literal god, none of that here. This is the villain, and he's the strongest we have to offer. Plain and simple. The fight was handled great, mixing elements of the World Eater and Irlena fights. However, both endings did seem abrupt. In the false ending, Afriel just kills his lieutenant and leaves without resolving anything with the player. Valerie and Zale get no resolution to Garl's death in that ending. Whereas in the true ending, he realized there are people stronger than him, so he just takes Roshan's hand and we're just supposed to expect he'll see reason now. There's no guarantee, but the party just trusts Roshan to handle it. Leaving both endings open-ended didn't bode well for what was otherwise a solid narrative. At least the game sent us off strongly. Valerie and Zale become guardian gods and swear to protect the multiverse while continuously returning to their friends on their birthday. Seeing them going in to hug an old Garl while not aging themselves made me sad on what was otherwise a really wholesome moment. And those have been my thoughts on Sea of Stars. I think overall it's a great game with some potholes. The game has a lot of personality and I would recommend people play it if they're looking for great gameplay, but maybe not for its story. What do you guys think of the game? Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. This has been Esrol, and I hope you've all enjoyed. Peace.